Welcome to PatsCast and happy National Tight Ends Day to all who celebrate. The New England Patriots win 32-13 over the Cleveland Browns to improve to 6-2, their fifth consecutive victory, and really an impressive win. I have to say, Cleveland has a real NFL defense. In fact, they ranked number 1 in the NFL heading into this game in total defense, just in terms of total yards allowed. And you know, they certainly have good DBs. They have Myles Garrett, who had a career game himself with 5 sacks, a Cleveland Browns record. Drake May was under consistent pressure, and the Patriots still found a way to open it up there in the second half and turn this seemingly tight game into a comfortable, kind of boring blowout victory. And really, I think this win started with the sequence heading into the locker room at halftime and into the third quarter, where the Patriots really opened things up quite a bit. Patriots, they were struggling, right? I mean, they were down 7-6 late into the second quarter, and it wasn't looking good. There was a third down play. Drake May had a big 44-yard throw down the field to Pop Douglas on a scramble crossbody throw. And after that play, the Patriots really just controlled the rest of this game. And, you know, it was still a challenge. May got strip sacked on that drive before halftime. Henry jumped off sides, turned a 3rd and 18 into a 3rd and 23. And then there was a 21-yard throw down to Booty that got the Patriots back in a field goal range. And they entered the locker room up 9-7 at halftime. And I think, you know, similar to last week's game against Tennessee, got off to a bit of a rough start, exchanging a lot of jabs, not a super high-scoring game, and then the Patriots make the right adjustments, stick with it, stay in the ball game, even take the lead. And then what's so great about having Mike Vrabel, and particularly Josh McDaniels, who's a master at these second-half adjustments, is they can come out with a completely different game plan in the second half and figure out what the defense, where their greatest strengths are, and attack their greatest weaknesses, and that's what they did. Coming out at halftime, three and out, Patriots pass rush got to Dylan Gabriel very quickly, and then immediately 2 massive runs on the outside from Travion Henderson, who had a career game for him. First possession out of halftime, they run a trick play, pitch to Ramondre Stevenson. He throws it back to May, throws it downfield to Hollins for a first down. Ramondre Stevenson, a big outside run. Demario Douglas, a sweep to the left, keeping attacking the edge, whereas they were trying to run it between the tackles all first half. Going to the outside, those are the second half adjustments they make, and then Drake May bootleg to Hunter Henry in the end zone for a touchdown to take a 16-7 lead, and that's all the Patriots needed for the rest of the game. But they kept piling it on, right? The defense, incredible there in that third quarter. Cleveland just couldn't run the ball all game. They don't have very many weapons at receiver outside of maybe Jerry Jeudy, who's not really a number 1 guy. Robert Spillane nearly gets a pick 6. Stephon Diggs gets the ball at the 1. There was a pick throw to Diggs, his first career touchdown as a member of the New England Patriots. Then the next possession, you had a big run stuff from Robert Spillane. Jalen Hawkins gets an interception on a prayer throw downfield. And then a couple of plays. 28-yard scramble from Drake May, followed by a deep shot to Kayshon Boutte in the end zone to give the Patriots a 30-7 lead. And that was it. Huge third quarter, and this is what good football teams do. I mean, how many times have we watched the Kansas City Chiefs over the year, you know, not playing their best, and then, you know, it's a tight game, they're playing an inferior opponent, and then third or fourth quarter, all of a sudden they just open things up and score 3 straight touchdowns. That's what the Patriots did today, and that's how modern NFL teams win. It's never going to be a perfect 4-quarter game for any of these teams. I don't care how good you are. You need to be able to make explosive plays in today's modern NFL, which is a little different from the Tom Brady days, right? I mean, certainly they were explosive with Randy Moss, and Gronk had his fair share of explosive plays, but it was a lot of game managing, right? It was a lot of death by 1,000 paper cuts, taking care of the football, and when you have the greatest quarterback of all time, you can kind of get away with that, but you're going to make mistakes. Offenses make mistakes. Drake May made a couple today, which we'll talk about in just a second, but that's what you need. A couple of good drives where you make explosive plays, and the Patriots had 3 of those in the third quarter, building off of turnovers from the defense, and were able to turn a 9-7 game or a 7-6 game where they were losing into a 30-7 lead, and that was it. It was just another boring fourth quarter where checking on the other games, checking on my fantasy team. Drake May, by the way, continuing to carry my fantasy team ever since I traded for him 3 weeks ago. That was the right decision. But, I think overall this game starts with the defense, right? Just another spectacular defensive performance. Again, they cannot stop early game scripts from the other team. It looked like the Patriots were going to get an easy 3-and-out defensively to start the game. They convert on 3rd and 11, and then Cleveland just marches downfield, scores another touchdown in the first quarter. And you say, here we go again. Maybe the defense will go back to being themselves after this. And of course they did. They did. And it was just a tremendous performance. I think the player of the game was Robert Spillane. I talked about his near pick six there in the third quarter, but those weren't even the biggest plays, right? He had 9 tackles throughout the game, 2 tackles for losses. Marcus Jones, another terrific game from him, and he's out there defending tight ends. I mean, we all know he's a small corner. He plays a lot bigger, at least this season. He plays a lot bigger than whatever he is, 5'7", 5'8", 5'9", and can really match up well against some of these bigger players and kind of poke the ball away at the last second. He had a hell of a game. Jalen Hawkins mentioned the interception. Kind of a one-handed pick, really going down with the football. An excellent job to hold on to it. And, Mike Vrabel just kind of dared Dillon Gabriel to beat the Patriots, and he couldn't do it. We know the Patriots have a top 5 NFL run defense, and this is a team, Cleveland, that does not have a ton of weapons. You got Njoku, who's a decent tight end. You got Jerry Jeudy, who is basically their number one, wouldn't be a number one on most teams. Harold Fannin Jr. is an okay player. Jamari Thrash. But, for the most part, they don't have a ton of weapons. They have to rely on the running game. So they're really dependent on Kinshawn Judkins, Travion Henderson's teammate, back in Ohio State. The two kind of platooned as the lead back there to kind of carry the load. And when you can't throw downfield and you're going up against one of the best run defenses in the league, you know what's going to happen. And that's really where Cleveland struggled. I like Dillon Gabriel, by the way. I was hoping the Patriots would draft him as the backup to Drake May, but I think that's all Dillon Gabriel's ever going to be. I think he will be a really solid number 2 throughout his NFL career. Eventually, you'd think Shedeur Sanders, I know he was hurt today, he's going to win that job in Cleveland just because he brings traits that Dillon Gabriel certainly doesn't. He's a small quarterback. He's accurate. He's smart with the football for the most part. But, it kind of lacks the elite athleticism that Shedeur Sanders has. But, I like Gabriel. And for the most part, the Patriots just took advantage of it, right? They took advantage of, stopping the run, having Khyiris Tonga there on the defensive line to just continue clogging things up. Little concern, I don't really know the status, but he went out with an injury in the fourth quarter. He's a massive part of this defense. Really, the most underrated player on the team, Khyiris Tonga really is. But, the Browns, they never really could make those adjustments when they were down badly to the Patriots defense. And they're really incapable of making those adjustments. When you're losing badly, you need receivers, you need chunk plays, and they're kind of forced to run the football because that's all they have. And the Patriots just feasted throughout the rest of that game. I mean, I know they scored a touchdown later there in the fourth quarter, but the Patriots, it was off of a bad punt. It wasn't really a big deal. There was, I think, 4 minutes left on the clock at that point. Patriots were mostly playing prevent. They were playing prevent on the drive before, where Cleveland chewed up a ton of time because, again, they have to keep the ball on the ground. And Patriots just let them have those dink and dunk 5, 6, 7-yard completions, and then they weren't able to convert on fourth down. So I know it was a 32-13 victory, but really, I would say this was a 32-7 victory, and the defense really only struggled there in that first drive of the game. So what we'll see next week against Atlanta, who, by the way, got blown out by the Miami Dolphins of all teams today. So, I was worried about that Atlanta matchup. Now, heading into that it feels like it should be an easy Patriots win. But you never know with the Falcons. They're a different team every week, so it's a game they should take seriously. I thought the Patriots should win today against Cleveland, but I thought it was going to be a closer game than it actually was because of this defense that Cleveland has, because of their pass rush. And, it was a tough game for Will Campbell, right? Going up against Myles Garrett the entire game, 5 sacks for him. There were 6 sacks total for Cleveland throughout the game. But, that really is just a testament to having a quarterback like Drake May, who, was under pressure nearly all of this football game. They were able to run the ball fairly decently. They were able to run the ball pretty well, but that was mostly in the second half. Weren't really moving the football much in the air in the first half, and then they found where the weaknesses are. They kept the defense on their toes, and the Patriots, we saw the explosive offense that we've seen each of the last 4 weeks there in that third quarter. So, a big emergent game from TreVeyon Henderson. I know he had a bad fumble there late in the game. It was kind of garbage time, so, not going to knock him too much for that, but I think that was a good moment of humility for TreVeyon Henderson, because this was a big day for him, not just in terms of him being the leading rusher, his first big game in the NFL, but he's going up against his teammate, Cleveland, Kinshawn Judkins, who's having a pretty decent year at running back over there. And TreVeyon Henderson, let's be honest, up until this week, he's been a bit of a disappointment. Judkins was drafted a couple spots ahead of TreVeyon Henderson, and he outperformed him. Judkins, 9 carries for just 19 yards, averaged just over 2 yards per carry, whereas TreVeyon Henderson, they really had the intention heading into this game of having him carry most of the load. I guess Stevenson had more carries, but 10 carries, that's a lot more than we've seen before. 75 yards total. He averaged 7.5 per carry, whereas Stevenson actually didn't do all that much. 14 carries to 34 yards, just under 2.5 a carry. So really, TreVeyon Henderson was the guy who broke this game wide open there in the third quarter with some of those outside runs. And as I said at the top of the podcast, that's where the Patriots struggled. We know this is still a Mike Vrabel team. And yeah, you have Drake May. You have some somewhat explosive receivers. Certainly Stephon Diggs. Pop Douglas had a big play today. But it's a Mike Vrabel team. They want to establish the run. That was a big part of last week's game at Tennessee. TreVeyon Henderson, they wanted to get him going early in today's game. He did a little bit in the first half, but really exploded there in the second half when they got going. So, some flashes. Fumble at the goal line wasn't great, but, that's what I'm saying. It was a good moment of humility for him. A big game. He's seen his teammate Stevenson struggle with the fumbles all season long. Has been a lot better the last few weeks. And then he has one himself. It just should kind of reinforce protecting the football, understanding that this could happen at any point in the game, and otherwise, just a tremendous game there for TreVeyon Henderson. And, you're going to have to lean into the committee approach, right? You can't just have Ramondre Stevenson carry the load week after week, and especially if you're going to the outside run and you're attacking the edge, which is how the Patriots began to open things up in the second half. TreVeyon Henderson, I think, is a lot better fit for that type of offense. And, this is really interesting. I think by the end of the season, the Patriots are essentially going to be running the Kyle Shanahan West Coast offense. It sounds crazy. And Mike Vrabel was actually asked about this earlier this week. Like, are you running the West Coast? Like, what are you running? And he kind of gave a non-answer. Because the truth is, the Patriots are running a little bit of everything. It's still some of the old school power duo gap stuff with Josh McDaniels, run it between the tackles, build off of play action that way. But they, as I've been saying for well over a month now, they are kind of more effective running to the outside. They're pretty decent at the wide zone stuff, and that generates, of course, the bootlegs, which Drake May is perfectly built to be a West Coast offense, right? Get the ball in his hands, moving with his legs, give him some options downfield. That's how they got the first touchdown to Hunter Henry, was on a bootleg. They get a ton of explosive plays off of those bootlegs, and you can really only do that if you're running the wide zone stuff, and Patriots were running it to the outside most of the second half, and that's how they got going. So, again, I think Josh McDaniels is going to have to consider, abandoning all the things that he's done in the past, because he needs to play to the greatest strengths of this team, and that's what they did in the second half. They said, we're going to stop pounding it up the middle. We're going to try to create some explosive plays, either on the outside, on the ground, or some plays downfield. Simple West Coast stuff. And what do you know? They put up 21 points there in the third quarter. Going to be fascinating to see how this offense continues to evolve, because this was never Josh McDaniels' thing, and he kind of has to do it now, and he's seeing a ton of success, and, a ton of credit to him for his willingness to, not be super ideological about the stuff he's done. I didn't expect it to look this much like a modern NFL offense, but you got a modern NFL quarterback, you got a really athletic, talented running back that you got in the early rounds this year in Travion Henderson. I think you got to continue leading into that kind of stuff. But look, it wasn't a perfect game. Like I said, the offense stumbled a little bit early. There was a bad 15-yard punt there, which set up the Browns for a short, easy drive, and their only score in the second half from Bryce Behringer. The Patriots had a safety where they forced Dylan Gabriel to throw it away, intentional grounding call in his own end zone, and then the next play, an safety onside kick. I don't know when the last time or if I've ever seen one of those plays before. Patriots just looked lost and confused, and Cleveland recovered, and it's like, okay, you got to fix that. I don't know if that's something they've ever practiced before, but that's something I'm sure they'll be patching up this week. Pass protection obviously struggled quite a bit today. Tough game for Will Campbell going up against Myles Garrett, but when he wasn't against Myles Garrett, at least from what I saw, he was pretty much flawless out there. And Garrett did move around a little bit, so it wasn't just Campbell versus Garrett the entire game. But he is the sole talented player, it seems like, on that team. Really, really carried the day for Cleveland. At a certain point, he's going to ask for a trade, right? I mean, he was upset this offseason. We talked about it on this podcast. Wouldn't it be great if the Patriots traded for a guy like Myles Garrett? I would give up the 4th overall pick for Myles Garrett. And even though we got Will Campbell, and I think it's worked out pretty well, I still would have done that, because you saw what he's capable of today. At a certain point, he's going to want to win, because Cleveland just has never had a good team since he's been there. But it must be a frustrating situation for him. He got benched late in the fourth quarter just to kind of preserve him a little bit, and he threw a fit on the sideline. So kind of a messy situation there in Cleveland. But overall, this team doesn't have a ton of weaknesses. The Patriots, they really don't. I mean, some of the mistakes that they made today are very coachable, very easy to fix. Drake May, was it his best game of the season? No, but he was more than competent out there. 18 of 24 passing, 282 yards. Obviously 6 sacks. Had a bad interception there in the first half. His first pick since, week 4, I think? Was it the Pittsburgh game? Week 3? Yeah, so May's been near flawless since that Pittsburgh game. Finally threw a pick today. Still managed to rack up almost a 136 passer rating. So outside of that pick, it was a pretty good game for him. Did get a strip sack where he probably should have tucked it in a little bit more, stepping up in the pocket or taking a sack. It's good that May, we know he's not going to be perfect. No quarterback is, but it's good that he made these mistakes in a game that the Patriots won in a blowout, because that's the last thing we want to be talking about this week is Drake May blew the game, or if it weren't for this turnover or this bonehead play he made, then Patriots would have won this game. Don't have to worry about that, but just didn't see the linebacker on that interception that he threw. And, his pocket awareness, strip sacks are going to happen. It happens to every quarterback. That pocket broke down pretty quickly on him. Didn't have a ton of room to step up. So I'm not going to knock him too much for that. But still, 18 of 24 passing, his completion percentage, probably still going to be the best in the NFL after this week. Had a ton of yards on the ground too and managed to protect himself. 7 carries for 50 yards. So he averaged 7 yards per carry. Drake May still playing MVP level football. So it's funny that we're saying okay, this was a setback week for Drake May. Still has a 136 passer rating. Still exceptional quarterback play from him. And really spreading the ball around a lot too. The receivers, it was not your normal cast today. Stephon Diggs just had 3 catches for 14 yards. Hunter Henry had a single catch. It was a touchdown, but that was it for those 2 players. Matt Collins was actually the leading receiver, 7 catches for 89 yards. Huge game for him. Caught all 7 of his targets. Kayshon Boutte continues to make big plays in big moments, whether they're touchdown catches downfield, whether they're big go-and-get-it third down catches. He had 75 yards today on just 3 catches. Demario Douglas had a big 44-yard catch, and Douglas is not the high-volume guy we thought he would be. I think a lot of that has to do with Stephon Diggs, but he's making explosive plays, or that's what he's done the last few weeks, so he doesn't need to be a high-volume guy if he's continuing to do that. Austin Hooper had 2 great back-to-back catches for 38 yards, and Stevenson had a catch for 15 yards, almost had a 50-50 ball deep downfield on the sideline near the end zone. Didn't get both feet in bounds, but I didn't know Ramondre Stevenson was capable of making those types of catches. He's turned into a pretty decent pass-catching back himself. So, like I said, there just aren't a ton of weaknesses. I mean, I guess you have a young offensive line on the left side, Will Campbell against elite defensive edge rushers, continues to struggle, but that's going to happen with anyone. Jared Wilson, I have to see how he performed today with him and Bradbury at left guard and center. Owenu had a bad offsides call at one point, but it looks like him and Moses held their own on the right side. So the offensive line play, particularly the pass protection, has been one of the best in the NFL. They are running the football a little bit better week to week. So let's see, they had 177 yards on the ground. 50 of that came from Drake May, so 127 yards from the running backs, including the 3-yard carry from Demario Douglas. Seems like they fixed it, right? Especially going with the outside run, that seems to be working. I don't think they need to trade for a receiver. Stephon Diggs can get open. He can separate. Demario Douglas can separate. Kayshon Boutte doesn't have to separate. Same with Matt Collins. They'll still come up with big catches. Austin Hooper and Hunter Henry still continue to be reliable. I guess the one thing with those 2 tight ends, and part of the reason I think Campbell struggled quite a bit against Myles Garrett is, they're not great blocking tight ends. So they were, especially with Hunter Henry, kind of chipping Myles Garrett, and he was beating the tight end and beating Will Campbell or beating Morgan Moses. So that really wasn't working well. But where they were better at blocking, as I talk about many times here, the second half adjustments, running to the outside. Then you can have Hunter Henry and Austin Hooper blocking defensive backs and smaller linebackers instead of large edge rushers. Again, I think you got to lean into the outside zone stuff because Henry, Hooper, they're much better blocking in that type of scheme than sort of the traditional Josh McDaniels scheme. But I guess that's the only weakness. Young offensive line, one of the best defensive run games in the NFL. I think we've been a little bit disappointed in Carlton Davis this season, but he had a solid game today. Christian Gonzalez, tremendous game, not just as a shutdown corner. He made a ton of really great tackles. He's become a solid all-around player. He's going to get a massive payday, I think, this offseason. Marcus Jones, doesn't matter who he's up against, seems to have big plays. The safeties look a lot better. The linebackers, they're not giving up the dink and dunk plays that should only be 3 yards and end up becoming 12, 15-yard plays. They were a lot better at that today. So, Borregales has been perfect as a kicker the last month or so. Behringer had a bad punt today, but for the most part, he's a reliable punter. There just are not a ton of holes in this team. Now, a lot of that is they're healthy, right? They've managed to stay healthy all season long for the most part. Losing Kyrus Tonga, we'll see how bad of an injury that was. Hopefully, he'll be back out there next week, but he's a big part of that run defense. Obviously, you lose Drake May, season's over at that point, but it's like that for many teams. If you lose Will Campbell, that would be bad, or if you lost Morgan Moses, I think that would be pretty bad too, or Stephon Diggs, or you lose one of the corners. But, other than that, right, I guess they need a little bit more depth at certain positions. So if they lose some players late in the season, that could be trouble. But For a team that, flipped half of its roster, 2/3 of its roster in the offseason, has a new head coach, has an offensive coordinator who's been here before, but is essentially running a very different offense, a new defensive coordinator. Now you have a different defensive play caller. They're playing like a team that has been building a system for 4 years now, and they've done this not even 2 months into the season. So, we're near the midway point right now. The Patriots are 6-2, and have the easiest schedule in the NFL. I'm not, certainly Tampa's going to be tough. Baltimore looked a lot better today. I think Cincinnati's still going to be a tough game. You got to play Buffalo one more time, but the division is yours. If Buffalo has a few clunkers the rest of the way, if you can beat Buffalo one more time, Patriots, I know they've had an easy schedule, but they're winning these games by a lot. They blew out the Browns. They blew out the Titans. Saints was a little closer than I think any of us were comfortable with, but they beat Buffalo. They blew out Carolina, who we've learned is a much better team than we thought. Miami, I thought actually played pretty well against the Patriots that game, and they still won that game. Miami looked pretty good today. I'm not saying, it's too early to say, this is an AFC contender. I still think they'd have a lot of trouble against Kansas City. I think they'd have trouble against Denver, frankly, or Indianapolis, and certainly if they have to play the Bills again, that's kind of a coin flip, but they should be in that running, right? They have the potential for this to be, like the surprise season where Mike Vrabel's Titans made it to the AFC Championship game. I wouldn't be shocked if the Patriots made it that far this season with the way they're playing right now. They're playing bad teams, but they're beating up on bad teams, and they're making explosive plays, the kind of stuff that can keep them in the game against really good teams. So, overall, I think last week was a far more resilient victory for the Patriots, but seeing what they did in the third quarter today tells me that they can play with the best of the best, because that's what modern NFL teams do. Drake May continues to ascend, had a couple of turnover-worthy plays today, but the command, the poise, the accuracy continues to get better and better. They have a defensive-first identity, which Vrabel has been trying to incorporate. They're opportunistic. They have a balanced attack between the run game and the pass game on offense. Henderson coming into his own, finally adding some juice that we were expecting to see early on. The defense is starting to create some turnovers, 2 interceptions today and a safety. And, I'm not just talking about playoffs now. We're talking about the division. We're talking about, can they contend in the AFC? I don't think any of us expected them to be 6-2 at this point in time, but everything changed with that victory against the Buffalo Bills. And again, these guys haven't been together for very long. This coaching staff, the players. If this is what they look like mid-season and they can continue to get better, then the rest of the AFC should take notice. But going to be interesting next week. Patriots on the road against the Atlanta Falcons, who got blown out by the Miami Dolphins today. I like Michael Penix. They certainly have a lot of offensive weapons there at tight end, at receiver. And their defense isn't terrible either, but they look pretty terrible today. And I don't think Atlanta travels very well, but they got blown out at home today. This could be another blowout victory for the Patriots potentially. But as Mike Vrabel has said, winning can build weak minds from time to time because you get comfortable, you think you're better than you actually are. They've managed to win 5 straight games here by staying focused. Can they continue to do that next week and improve to 7-2 before they go down to Tampa for a real test against a real NFL Super Bowl contender? Going to be fascinating to see, but I thought this was really an impressive, particularly the third quarter, really an impressive victory for the Patriots that says not only are they a good team, they can make explosive plays and contend with the best teams in the NFL. And that's really my main takeaway coming out of this game. But that's it for this episode of PatsCast. If you like this video and you're watching on YouTube, be sure to smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, hit that notification bell, or subscribe if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. We'll see you very soon with more New England Patriots coverage.